How do you manage money in a crisis? What should you do and what shouldn't you do? Maureen Parent is here to discuss it, starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Maureen, welcome back. You are in what office today as we record this?
I am in the Ottawa office in the Canada location.
And for those who are watching on video, you will see outside your window that it is all white because we are recording this in the month of February 2023. And of course, it is the dead of winter here. So I don't know when we're actually broadcasting this. Maybe we'll be broadcasting this in July and everyone will go, oh, that's a nice peaceful setting there.
Yeah, it'll look cold in the heat.
There you go. So today's topic is how to manage money in a crisis. And I'm going to let you define what a crisis is. I think everybody would probably have a somewhat different definition. From an economic point of view, it's obvious to me we're in a recession. It's not obvious to the guys who decide that we're in a recession, although I think they will backdate it to probably like October, November of 2022, and that's when they'll say it actually started. So that would be one type of crisis. Oh my goodness, she's got the new tattoos, the Debt Free in 30 tattoo. That is fantastic.
I got a new tattoo.
That is fantastic. It looks like it's a peelable tattoo to me, but I'm sure you're going back to your tattoo artist to get it permanent. So that's fantastic.
That's right.
I think that's what we're going to request all guests have is a permanent Debt Free in 30 tattoo. So, question number one, what is a crisis? How would you define that?
Well, a crisis really is, it's an event. It's a time of intense difficulty, right? You're in trouble, you're in danger, there's something going on. It's extremely difficult. There are many problems, not just one usually, right? There's a threat, a surprise, and a really short decision time, right? So a crisis can happen at any time.
So that's interesting. Intense difficulty, it's a surprise, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. There's a short time frame to it.
A short time frame to be able to make a decision.
Make a decision, yeah. The crisis may have been building up for years.
Yeah.
But at some point you get to the breaking point. So would it be fair to say that virtually all of our clients are in a crisis when they come to see us?
Yeah, they are. Yes. They're definitely, whether it's a crisis of just the stress level, I can't handle it. Because sometimes we talk to people and we say, hey, this, and they're like, oh, that's not so bad. And then it feels less like a crisis. And then, yes, there are other times where people are definitely in a crisis, and we do see that regularly.
So let's talk about some crises here. I don't know how to pluralize that word, so I'm just going to...
Crises. Yeah.
Crises, there you go. Okay. So... The most obvious crisis I can think of would be I'm losing my job or
right.
I lost my job. And that's a crisis, obviously, psychologically, because my self-worth comes from my job. It shouldn't, but that's kind of how we all are. And so when I lose that, I've just lost my sense of self-worth, all the people I talk to every day. But of course, very importantly, I've also lost my income. That's a big problem when I lose my job. So what is the thought process you advise people when they are going through job loss or they've already lost their job loss? It's obviously a big crisis. What are the kind of things you're discussing at that point?
Well, and just to point out too, sometimes people are just worried about losing their job too. So there's many layers. You just start with the worry, I'm going to lose my job. What's going to happen? Then you've lost your job and what's going to happen. So if you're at the point where you're just worried about losing your job, then you want to look at the reality of that concern. Is it simply just a worry because you're stressed and you want to have some sense of stability? Or are there talk of layoffs? Have you been written up? So if you're in that worry phase, you might want to book a meeting with your boss and have a bit of a review if you haven't recently had one, and just say, hey, where am I at? What can I do? Prepare your resume. And that's something that you would do, obviously, if you've lost your job as well. You want to make sure, it's always good to have a resume prepped at all times anyways, just because you never know, or something might come up that's amazing as an opportunity and you want to jump on it. So definitely make sure you prepare your resume and you're reaching out to other resources, right? Making sure you have EI am I eligible for EI? How can I get that in? Am I eligible for the work programs that the government supports? Like they'll pay for schooling and whatnot. So there's lots of government programs out there to kind of reach out to. So the first thing to, like after you've stabilized that, then you want to, so you're getting your resume, you're looking for work, but you're also applying for EI or some kind of other sources of income.
Yeah, and just on that point, so you're right. Let's take the first scenario where I've still got my job, but I'm worried I'm going to lose it, either because, the economy's lousy or the company isn't doing well or my boss doesn't like me or whatever. So I am of the view, and I think you are too, that you should always have your eyes open, and if I get fired tomorrow, what am I going to do? That's the question you should always be asking yourself. And I ask myself that question every day. What if I fire myself from Hoyes Michaelis? What would I do? And I think the answer is what you said. Okay, number one, I got my resume ready, so it's always kind of fresh, and I've got it on my home computer, not my work computer, or I've got it in my something I can access when they walk me out the door. But I think even more importantly than that, I'm looking ahead to if I did get laid off tomorrow, where is the first place I would call? Where is the first place I would send that resume? So, if I work for, I don't know, a big bank and the bank lays me off, well, I guess I would be contacting the other big banks. I'd be contacting the competitors in my industry or something that's similar. If I have a skill set that is applicable in a lot of different industries, I'm a manager, I'm an administrative assistant, something like that. Okay, I guess I could work in pretty much every industry, but where specifically would I go? Who's the first call I would make tomorrow? And do I have their phone number? Do I have their address? Which then leads to, well, I should probably be staying in touch with those kind of people. So either I should be, I don't know, networking, I should be in the LinkedIn group, I should be in the, I don't know how else people do it. But I guess my point is I always know what the next step is going to be, so that when this, as you described it, a surprise, there's a very short time frame to make a decision. Well, I've already made the decision. The resume's ready and I'm ready to go. Does that sound like a good framework there then?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And then if you still have your job and you're worried about losing your job, another thing to do is try to find ways to make yourself valuable at work.
Yeah, don't get fired.
Make sure that the boss is like, you know what? I know this person. I appreciate this person. I like the work that they do. They're not top of my list to let go. So there's always that. So making yourself valuable is important. And sometimes it's as simple as being the one who shows up a wee bit early or not running out the door right on time, like little things that can help.
Well, and at the very least, don't be showing up late and leaving early.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So do things to make yourself valuable. And then if you've already lost the job for whatever reason, sometimes, maybe talking to an employment lawyer, if that situation warrants it, maybe there was an incorrect firing or it was constructive dismissal or something. So you can look at those options if it's applicable. And the other thing is sometimes you just have to get whatever job. Like I have mouths to feed. I got to get a job. I'm going to keep looking for something that is of value to me and that I want to stay in. But right now I'm getting a job.
Yeah. And the trick with that is if I get laid off and I've been at the company for a while, I'm eligible for EI.
Yeah.
If I go get any job, well, now I don't get the EI. So if EI is going to pay me, I don't know, $1,500 a month, does it make sense to go get a job that's going to pay me $1,500 a month? Well, that's a difficult question because that job I get may be the springboard to the next job. And so, yes, it's a good idea to take it, but I also don't want to be working at a job and therefore I don't have time to go on interviews and look for another job. So that's a tricky decision to make in the short term.
It is, but sometimes people don't get EI or you're not eligible or whatnot. So in that situation, you're just jumping on whatever. But yes, I definitely agree. If the EI you're getting is worth more than the job and that job isn't going to be something that you can move up from, but when you're on EI, realize that your full-time job is now looking for work. right? That becomes a full-time job because you throw out tons of resumes, you are doing all the research to make sure you nail that interview, you're doing all that practice. So that becomes your full-time job on EI.
Yeah, and you made the comment about making yourself more valuable. I think that's something you can do throughout the process when you are working. Is there another course I can take? Is there an industry association I can join? And you don't want to be spending 30 hours a week on all these side things to potentially make yourself more valuable. But if it's a case of, there is an industry association and they've got a, meeting once every 2 months and they got a conference every year or something. Well, if I can be involved in that, then maybe I've got, I'm certainly expanding my network. And let's face it, most great jobs aren't advertised in the newspaper. I don't even know if jobs are advertised in newspapers anymore. It's someone you know. Yeah. It's primarily through networking. So I think that's a pretty important thing. So, okay, so we're talking about how to manage money in a crisis. One of them is I lose my job. I think another one that is on everybody's mind at the moment and has been for the last few months is I go to the grocery store and everything costs more.
Yeah.
So my paycheck hasn't gone up.
And the grocery stores are making still tons of money.
Well, this is true. I'm certainly not a grocery store apologist, so I'm not going to defend them here. So, okay, what am I supposed to do then when I'm suffering through the food inflation that we've got? I'm feeling overwhelmed. How do I even start thinking about getting that crisis under control?
Right. And that's super hard because a lot of times when we're stressed, we do tend to eat more, right? Like I'm in a crisis. I feel like crap. I am going to eat a bunch of chocolate, right? Or for me, right? Or whatever it is. But a lot of people do that. So it can be really hard to kind of restrict that. But when you're looking at the groceries and stuff like that, you're doing things like buying things on sale, but making sure that they're actually on sale. Like I was talking with one person, and in a grocery store, sometimes you can flip up the tag to see what the original price was. It was a 1 penny difference. So it was sale, but it was 1 cent. So if it's not something that you would buy normally, then don't spend money on it because you're getting sucked into making sure they rotate their shelves and the produce and whatnot. So when you're buying, make sure it's on sale. You can buy the discounted items, the meat's a bit cheaper, but you're cooking it tonight and it expires tomorrow. Buy it on the discount.
And expiration dates are a huge thing because you have to look at every single expiration date because the dozen eggs that's here might be 2 weeks different than the dozen eggs that are at the back. Okay, well, take those. If I'm going to pay less for something, great. But you're right. If it expires today, well, then I better be able to cook it today. So I suspect what a lot of people are doing is instead of just going to the grocery store once a week and loading up, it's like, well, maybe I got to be going 2 or 3 times a week and grabbing those things that are expiring tonight, but no problem. I can cook them tonight and therefore, get a bit of a deal. Buying something that's going to expire and you throw out, that's not a deal.
No, that's not a deal. No, it's a waste of money. You may as well just take your $5 or $20.
Throw it out.
And throw it out.
Yep, I agree.
So other things, you can use filler food. Like I know, I grew up on a farm, so we were, and it was a hobby farm, right? So only one parent was working, the other one was on the hobby farm. So we were rich. So, using filler food can really help, like adding potatoes to a meal, realizing that, there's a lot of nutritional, knowledge nowadays, but you know what, if you have even a short period of time where you're using foods that you wouldn't normally use, as long as it's not causing a physical problem, it's fine, right? I mean, I have a friend who's a nurse and she's like, I grew up on potatoes. That's pretty the only vegetable I had and I'm perfectly healthy. So it's balancing that. So using filler foods can really help. More beans and rice. It's a complete protein, tends to be super cheap and you can add it to meals. One big thing is don't shop hungry. That's like the worst thing to do. And then when you are like plan your shopping. So you look at, see what's actually on sale protein wise, because meats tend to be the most expensive. So plan your meal around that. I'm going to get this pack and I'm going to be able to make these 3 meals from it. So, because a lot of times if you're making your own meals and you're buying vegetables to go with those meals, you're not necessarily using them again. And then you forget about them. And sometimes they're starting to go off. So make a quick soup with the ones that aren't, that you need to throw out, because the soups are nourishing and you're using things up, so you don't have food waste.
Now, I got a question for you about planning. And so you actually go to the grocery store and buy stuff, right? This is not some theoretical discussion we're having. You actually go, okay.
To be honest, my husband loves cooking, so he actually does more of that than I do. I mean, I do go to the grocery store, but I'm buying all the background supplemental so that when we actually need something, we have it. But he does the planning, and this is what he does. And this is what I did before he took it over.
So here's my question for either you or your husband.
Yes. Get him on the phone.
Get him on the phone here. So I agree with making a plan. I mean, our phone number is 310-PLAN. So we kind of believe on the financial side, that's a good thing. So on, let's say my shopping day is Wednesday. I don't know what your shopping day is, but let's say it's Wednesday, middle of the week. So on Monday and Tuesday, we make a list. We're going to have this. We're going to have that. Here's my plan. I go to the store and my plan is going to change, because I was planning to make a pot of chili, because chili is, I don't know if you would call that filler food or not, but I think there's beans and stuff in there. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm going to do. And I also like to, chop up some celery and put that in my chili. And I get to the store and I find that celery is $9.
Okay. So don't put in celery.
Right. So I'm not putting in celery. And it may be that we were going to have some chicken and broccoli this week, and I get to the store and chicken isn't on sale, and broccoli, because it's the middle of winter, is again $9. So
you're checking the flyers. Like, you do want to check the flyers for your local store to find out what's on sale. So you're building around, but when you go, that it's there.
And when you get there, it also has to not be crap. Because if the broccoli has been sitting there for 2 weeks, and I don't know what it's like in the Ottawa region, but here in southwestern Ontario, the biggest grocery store chain, whose name we will not mention, but the guy's on TV all the time, their supply chain is crap. And if you want fresh vegetables, you got to say, hey, can you go into the back and get me the fresh stuff? Because I know you're trying to sell all the crappy stuff. So I think
my son just got a job at a grocery store.
Excellent.
So he says when they put out the new produce, they put the fresh stuff underneath and at the back.
Right.
So if the top stuff doesn't look good, just dig a little.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the key to it all. So it's not just the price; it's also the quality. You got to be mindful of all of that. So.
And the other point too, sorry to cut you off, but especially nowadays with technology, buying frozen vegetables can be more nutritional. They can have more of a nutritional value now than some of the produce that you're getting now, because they were frozen at the peak of freshness, right? And so if there's frozen vegetables on sale, that's a great thing to stock up on, because then it's also an emergency backup. I have canned goods, I have frozen goods. If things go a bit sideways, then at least I can make, a quick stir fry or something like that.
Yeah, because I got my frozen peas, and so I'm good to go.
And I do tend to freeze a wee bit of meat as well. Or when we cook once, but we make enough for 2 meals. So we eat the meal and then we take the other one and put it in the freezer. Because when you buy items and you're cooking for a number, in a way, a larger volume is cheaper, because you're using up everything that you have, and you can buy the ones that are on sale. When you're an individual and you're buying the individual packs, they can be more expensive.
Yeah, well, and making something like lasagna, or shepherd's pie, which is definitely comfort food and definitely winter food. It takes time. You can't whip up a lasagna in 12 minutes.
Right.
And the way I make it, it takes like 8 hours, because I'm a horribly inefficient cook. And I put bacon in mine, but that's a show for another day.
Ooh, I gotta mention that to my husband. He loves bacon. Bacon makes everything better.
Exactly. I'll send him the recipe. So if I'm going to go through all that work, well, if I make a double batch, it doesn't take me double the work. And then I've got one we're going to eat and one that goes in the freezer. And that way I'm not it's 5:00 and I've got no food. And it's like, oh, well, I guess I better phone Uber and skip the dishes and fast food and all the rest of it, which then throws your system out of whack. So I think the planning is obviously key in all of that. So, okay. So we've talked about food, and I think there's probably tons more we could say on that, but
I would just say one more thing, and maybe you can blank it out if you don't like it, but you know what? Another thing is to speak up to our members of parliament, whether it's who's in power or the opposition, because we have a voice and we need to speak up and say, this is wrong. Things need to change. It can't just be, oh, blah, 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 supply chain, blah, 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 everything costs more. Because then when we buy into that, like, will it ever reduce? So we have to kind of say, no, we have a problem. We need this to be adjusted. What are you doing to make sure this is not so overwhelming for so many people? Like, gas is high, food is high, everywhere we turn is high, income's not going up. Fuck.
Yeah.
What are they expecting?
I won't bother blanking that out, but my opinion is there's no point. Like, they're all the same. It doesn't matter who the guy is. They're all exactly the same. They want to make sure the rich get richer, and they've done a fantastic job of that. So, but if I run into the prime minister at any point and I've never met the guy, I will mention that to him. Okay. So another crisis, and this is a little more what we deal with every single day, and that's, financial crises. So my bills are starting to pile up, which I think is very common these days. What do you do? What's one of the first things as you start feeling this kind of turning point that, well, I was making all my minimum payments, but now I'm at the point where, I'm getting a little bit behind on my minimum payments. I'm not in a massive crisis yet, but I can certainly see the train coming down the tracks. What's the thought process there? What are you advising people at that stage?
Right. So, and there's different things. So there's, your utility bills, and then there's your credit card debts and those kinds of things. So breaking those out when you're looking at the bills that are, you need for your life, like utilities and whatnot. Like, you want to look at the necessity of the bill. Right? Do I need all of those streaming services? Do I need all of that cable programming? Do I need this package on my phone? So you want to kind of do an analysis of what's the necessity of this particular bill, and is there any way I can adjust it to decrease that? So for credit card debts and loans and whatnot, you want to look at, can I do things like call the company and have my interest rate decreased on the credit card, because then it'll make the payments more manageable? Do they have a payment plan? Like, is that still in place? Can I defer it? What can I do about that? So one thing you want to do is don't panic. Look at your income, look at your expenses. Is there a way to increase your income without getting sucked into a get-rich-quick scheme? Can you decrease, as I said, your expenses, prioritize them? What's the most important expense? Like, sometimes you just kind of have to say, no, we can't do that. That's not an expense we can have right now. And then, speaking to a professional to say, hey, like a trustee, to say, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm feeling this pinch. I'm so stressed. What can I do? It's a free consultation. So there are people where I'm just saying, hey, if you structure your budget this way, you're good to go, and you can at least do that. And, in 5 years, you can be done. Because that tends to be how I look at it. Can you get through this in 5 years and come out the other side? If yes, then golden. And if you need help, then we can suggest, a proposal or bankruptcy or whatnot. But we look at both options, right? Or multiple options, doing it on your own, other ways, or bankruptcy or proposal. Sometimes when you've talked to a professional and you get that perspective, it alleviates that stress, because the unknown in our heads is so terrifying and traumatizing. Like, that creates a lot of the stress. Having facts and knowledge can really help us be able to handle what's in front of us.
Yeah, and having a third-party sounding board isn't a bad idea. And you're right, coming in to talk to us doesn't cost anything. the law says we are not allowed to charge any money until you've actually filed your procedure. So if someone is charging you any money up front, then it's a scam. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. And we can't file someone if they're not eligible to do so. Like there are technicalities that have to be met. It's not like anyone who walks through the door is like, oh, we're filing you. Yeah. No, it has to be what's right.
So let's finish the show then with some, quick hit do's and don'ts here. So, I've got a financial crisis going on, whatever that crisis might be. What can I do? So you've already given us some do's. I mean, take stock of your situation. Okay, what's my income? What's my expenses? What are my debts? Let's make sure I know what's going on. What other do's would you put on that list of things you should do when you're approaching a financial crisis?
Right. So one of the things that I would definitely do is take stock of what you're thankful for. That is something that I do. I mean, I think that's a common cultural thing. Oh, not cultural thing, but it's out there, like show gratitude, right? So sometimes when we're focused on the lack, that is what we get. And so we need to switch gears and focus on what we're grateful for. And sometimes like I keep the bar so low I could trip over it because on stressful days, I'm like, you know what? I'm alive. My kids are healthy. Like, what else do I want? Like I have a roof over my head, okay, awesome, and so that's, I think that's important because our mindset can really do a lot in shifting how we look at it. And as I had said earlier, getting all the facts. You really want to look at what's real and making those hard decisions. I think that's probably the hardest part is, well, I don't want to be going through this crisis. I'm sick of it. I'm done. I'm not changing anything. I don't want it to be this way anymore. And it's catching yourself in that moment and saying, no, you know what? This is temporary. We have to bear down, get through it, and we'll get to the other side. And if I can cut some things now, later on when things stabilize, I can bring them back in and I will do so with more peace of mind. That makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And what you're saying is, okay, look on the bright side, because clearly if we're having this conversation, we're not dead. So it might be a pretty dire situation, but I guess, there is always some positive element to bring out of it. So if you can focus on that, then that puts you in a bit better of a mental headspace. So those are a bunch of the do's. What are some things you would say, okay, you want to make sure you don't do this when you're faced with a crisis?
Don't panic, right? My cousin, he's a paramedic and he's like, slow is steady, steady is fast. And I kind of remind myself of that. And that's even in the thinking and our reactions, right? Slow is steady, steady is fast. Because if we're rushing to solve a problem and we're buying into that sense of a crisis, I'm not saying that some people aren't in a crisis, but there is an element of buying in. Don't panic, because some people will panic borrow. They'll go to payday loan places. They'll go to the bank. They'll go, max out their credit card, increase their limit because they have to get through. I will just keep going. I will live my life as I live. I will do this and then it'll be better. But it doesn't. So when you're panicking, don't do that.
Yeah, there's really no advantage to panicking. I can't think of a scenario where it makes things better. I mean, I guess if you're being chased by a bear, you need the adrenaline rush to run away.
You still don't want to panic. Yes, you want to use because you don't want to react. You want to always act, right? Reacting puts you in a situation that's probably not going to go well.
Because slow is steady and steady is fast. That's right. So
he's a paramedic, right? If you ever watch a paramedic doing something, they're very particular about it. They're not running screaming towards the problem. They're getting there.
They're methodical. They're moving quickly, but they know exactly what they're doing. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and also I don't know why this is a random thought that came to me, but sometimes all the paramedics, police, firemen, they all practice and they train, military, all of that. They train so that when they're in the situation, it is there. So you know what? I think for someone who's budgeting regularly and whatnot, they're almost training themselves to be able to respond to a crisis. So if you haven't started budgeting now, start that process and start that habit, because when you always want to, I think of prepare for the worst, hope for the best, right? So I think if you aren't doing it now, start, and always make sure you have a prep plan in place, because then that will help you respond more than react. because it's already there.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I'm obviously not a big fan of budgeting, as I've said many times on this show, but I do believe you should always be looking ahead.
Yeah.
So in the morning, I take a look at my calendar for the next week. Oh, I see what's coming up. There's some things I need to do to plan for that meeting I've got, 3 days from now. It's the same with everything else we're talking about. Okay, I hope I don't lose my job, but if I do, what will happen? I've already got it all lined out. I've got a plan when I go to the grocery store. I've got a plan for, how I can keep my expenses under control. I'm acting. I'm not just, reacting and getting into trouble by doing that. So I think that's excellent advice. So,
and you don't have to do it in a way that's cumbersome. Like you don't always have to be planning. Like it's a set and forget. Like I always have to take the moment to plan, and then you're moving on. I have it in place. Perfect. Because you don't want to get overwhelmed with constantly thinking either, because that just builds stress as well.
Paralysis by analysis. You don't want that either. So there you go. We've thrown in so many buzzwords on this show. I think that's absolutely fantastic. So Maureen, thank you very much for being here. I will put a link in the show notes to how people can reach you. Obviously, the easiest way is to go to hoys.com and type in the name Maureen, and they'll see your picture there, and they can send you an email or they can give you a call. Because you meet with people in either our Ottawa or our Canada offices. Final comment. What have you got?
Yes, I think I like this comment. I have actually used a lot. This too shall pass. In those moments of crises or anything, I think it's such an amazing thing to remember. This too shall pass. It can be such an excellent mantra to get you through those moments.
Yeah. Don't panic. Don't worry about it. But obviously take action to deal with it as well. It's a combination of both. Excellent. Right. Well, that's a great way to end it. This too shall pass. And in fact, this show is now passing. It's now over. So Maureen, thank you very much for being here. Again, you can go to hoys.com or just go on the interweb and type in Maureen Parent, and I'm sure you can track her down that way. As I said, she meets with people in our Canada and Ottawa offices in the nation's capital. Thank you very much, Maureen. That is our show for today. I'll put links in the show notes to everything we discussed. If you're watching on YouTube, click all the buttons, get the algorithm on our side. And if you're listening to the audio version, please subscribe and like the podcast. That is our show for today. Thanks for listening. My name is Doug Hoys. Until next week, that was Debt Free in 30.